Friday evening, Internet people. Today is, oh my goodness, it's November 12th. I don't know where the month is going, and I don't know how I feel about it yet. But I feel like time is flying in this like COVID pandemic time warp that we're in right now. But I have a new friend to introduce on the live today, and she has just joined. So I'm going to introduce Maria. Hi, Maria. Let me get you on here.
I'm real? Is this working?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yay.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Your face is like, oh gosh, it's not working. And I was like, I'll just stay here frozen. It's fine.
We did it! Yay! Well, let me
All right.
introduce you really quickly. So, this is Maria. I literally thought your last name was Vanilla when I first saw your name on the, like we got a list of all of y'all's names, like when y'all first got hired, and I was like, someone's up in here with the last name Vanilla. I was like, that's dope. And then I like actually looked, and I was like, that's still really cool. And I was like, I wonder how many times someone's said Vanilla before.
Well, actually, that's how I explain it. It's vanilla, like vanilla, but with an O at the end, because, or else it's just like, is it vanilla with a B or vanillo because the double L? And so if my last name was Vanilla, I would probably be way cooler than I actually am. So that'd be pretty cool.
Nah, it's literally, it's the same thing. It just doesn't have that like last little boop, like on
Like
the
a
end.
line. Just a subtle line right there. Yeah.
Yes. So you're already there. You're already at that level of coolness. So this is Maria Vanillo. She is a Master of Science and an LPC-Associate, supervised by Molly McCann. And so Maria's educational background, Maria graduated from New Mexico State University in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in psychology. I think my supervisor actually went to college over there. Pretty sure.
That's cool.
But so Maria then attended Northern Kentucky University and graduated with a master's degree in mental health counseling in 2020. So Maria enjoys working with adults experiencing difficulties regulating their anger, anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Maria uses cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness to help clients establish healthy coping skills. And a fun fact about Maria is that she has had a racehorse named after her. Can we start with that?
I was gonna say, do you want to start with the racehorse or end with it? That's funny.
Let's start with it.
So it's funny because I just had a pep talk with my mom right before this. I was like, I don't want to mess it up because, of course, now my mind's going blank. I know my family, but I'm so excited to be here. I was like, I can't remember anything right now. I'm blacking out. But so my grandfather, he was a horse trainer and he owned a racehorse. And so the name of the horse was Ti Amo Mariana. And that means I love you, Mariana. And so that's my full name. And yeah, so I've had a racehorse named after me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it was funny because like she was still alive while I was growing up, obviously. But she was kind of like mean. So we were like, you just wanted to give her some space, which I feel like is me essentially of like, I just need a little bit of space. I don't need you to like be in my bubble. So we understood each other and I appreciated her from a distance. That's how our relationship worked.
That's appreciating from a distance. I'm also looking at that Chewbacca picture of you that is like very much so not from a distance at all. It's like smothering you.
Yeah. So I had to give you the whole like, this is me when I am not comfortable. And then the other one was like pure excitement of me just enjoying life fully. So I was like, we need to give a little mix of both so I don't look like standoffish. That's the goal.
I would A hug from Chewbacca would probably be so exciting and probably a little bit overwhelming too.
A lot of hair.
Yeah, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
got me thinking, like, woo, like, could you breathe? Imagine it was like in. That's probably why you're like turned all the way away. You're like,
Yeah, I'm like, good. I don't want his hair touching me. And like, he's like hugged so many people that day. Like, I'm good. It was a hard fast. Yeah. And this is like pre-COVID. So like, I'm
oh
not,
man,
yeah.
yeah.
So this whole space thing has been within me for forever. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I want to go ahead and start with some questions for you. So we'll go until about around 8. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, it's really fun. Mm-hmm.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, so just off of that fun fact about, just the racehorse, and, it sounds like I think that's so cool that you went to college like in New Mexico and then you went to like Kentucky, and I just admire people who like kind of get an education from different places, because that's so
Mm-hmm.
brave, I think. Just to, because like those are just like pack up, go somewhere else, stay there for a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and then pack up and go somewhere else, and then stay there, and then go
Mm-hmm.
somewhere else.
And now I'm here. Yeah,
And then
a
now
lot of
you're
moving.
here. Do you have like any family in Austin or friends, or did you just pick Austin?
So how it worked is before this, we were living in Cincinnati, and my partner's from New Mexico. That's where we met in college. And then my family's from Southern California, which I have to whisper here because then all the like, oh, this girl comes out being the Californian. So I try to keep it under wraps. Um, but so how it worked out is we were looking to move and become closer to family because we truly saw how difficult it was to, whether it was like coming back or even in terms of like just constantly having to call and like video chat and all those things. We wanted to be closer, especially by the time like we had a family. And so we were looking at Texas, and it was between San Antonio and Austin, and everything kind of fell into place. And I got a job at AFC. That was wonderful. And then Jose got a job, my boyfriend, and it's where we settled. And so I like it. I like how everybody likes it here, but then the cynic in me is like, okay, I gotta find a problem. Um, but everybody's like genuinely happy to be here except for me, which is kind of funny. But no, I'm just trying to like explore and figure out what piece I can like feel at home with. And that's the hardest thing, is just trying to feel comfortable in a new place, and it takes time. Um, but this is kind of silly, but I studied abroad when I was in undergrad, and I had the hardest time. That's the only time I've ever been homesick because I couldn't talk to anybody and I couldn't be funny. I was barely learning the language. And so that felt like really isolating. So I say if everything's in English, I can do this. Totally fine. I can be myself. I can make friends easily. I can make little jokes here and there. And so, yeah, it was a really eye-opening experience, and that comes with a lot of privilege and fortune to do that. But I'm really thankful for that experience of, oh, this is what it's like when you know you're not supposed to be here and are like trying to run away, but yet at the same time, I can blend in and just be invisible for a second, and that feels safe within itself as well.
That's so interesting. Where did you go to travel?
I studied in Lyon, France, which is 2 hours from Paris. So a really big city, and it was gorgeous and wonderful. And then I traveled by myself to Italy. I went to Milan, and that was my little like, you did it at the end, like you survived, which is very silly to like feel like it was a huge thing, but it's
Oh,
the only time
that
I
is a
felt
huge thing,
lonely.
though. It
Yeah.
really is. Like me and my navigational skills would never, like, we would never, because you would never see me again. So like,
Oh.
that's such a, like, that is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Thanks.
and that's so interesting because we went on our honeymoon. Um, part of our honeymoon was in Paris, and so I was like really surprised by. I mean, everyone really speaks English, and
Mm-hmm.
like I think well, I was surprised by that, but it's interesting. Like 2 hours away, it
Mm-hmm.
was.
And that's the hard thing too, is you want to get the full experience. And so of course a lot of people would speak English, but then I didn't want to be that person. And I'm like, I'm here to learn the language and like I want to make the most out of it, but like I'm sad and I miss people. And then I like figured out like you could be looking at the most beautiful thing, but if you don't feel right mentally, or if you're missing somebody so hard and you can't share that experience, kind of what's the point? And so that was a really eye-opening moment of like, oh my goodness, I'm in love with somebody. And I can't see myself without them. But then in return of like, oh, I can do this. Even though it's hard and it's painful, I can still do this. And so I'm just going to make the most out of my time.
Wow, that is that's amazing. I bet you learned things about yourself on that trip that you probably would not have learned like in other ways. I bet that just sounds like a really profound like learning experience and life changing, really.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, another like, oh, this is really happening was I'd always been super embarrassed about my skin and my complexion because I had like really intense hormonal acne. And for whatever reason, my host was determined to help me in a sense. And so I was like walking through the streets without any makeup on because we were going to the pharmacy to like help my face. And I was like, I hit a new low. Oh my goodness, what is happening? But the thing that was nice is just like, even though it felt like such a big deal in my mind, it felt so important to her. And so I think that's incredible that she took on my problem as her own, which was a little painful because I was like, I don't want to do it like this. And she's like pulling me by the like all the fury in my soul. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it and I'm going to be appreciative. And then I'm going to figure things out once I get back to the States. So yeah, that was a really intense moment when you go like, what's the thing that you're really subconscious about? And I'm like, I don't know, just tell the whole world about it. But thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. So that's how that worked.
Dude,
Mortified. Mortified. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would do. I would, if someone got so like, sounds like they wanted to help, but you were also like, can you not?
Yeah.
Like hi.
I I want to crawl out of my skin. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
No, but it was a
Wow.
good like teaching lesson in I want to help people. I really do. But you can't take on other people's problems as your own because you're never going to know precisely what is going on. Slash, you don't want to make somebody dependent upon you. And so that was just like okay, now we're going to run away and I'm going to figure it out by my own. So,
Yeah.
no.
Well, okay, that actually plays really good into the question I wanted to ask you about like your journey of just becoming a therapist and wanting to help people. So tell the viewers, like present and then future viewers who see this, just about your journey to where you are now.
So how it worked was I was always kind of the person that listened, especially in high school, um, and being that confidant. And then it was funny because I went to one of our school like hosted a career fair, and so it was so funny because I really wanted to go see the psychologist because that's the only person closest to the mental health field that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And the school counselor at the time was kind of more like a guidance counselor. So I only met him once and he's like, you're going to college? I was like, yeah, goodbye. Okay. It's like, that was nothing. Okay. That was weird. And so I went to the talk and it was just like, I don't think this is doable. Just the way she described it and how hard it was. And I was just like, oh. And so I was kind of let down. which was funny because the whole entire time my dad was there and he's just like, come see my talk. He was so excited. I was like, yeah, but I'm also supposed to be like figuring out what I want to do with my life, Dad. But like, sure. Okay, cool. So, anyways, um, time had passed and then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I narrowed it down between being a counselor or being a dental hygienist, which is weird because two things I'm good at are listening and cleaning. So I was like, let's make the most out of this. We'll capitalize on it. Um,
Yeah.
and and then I was just picturing myself as a dental hygienist, and I was like, this isn't going to work because obviously I care about their teeth, but I want to know what's going on. Like, and nobody likes that chatty dental hygienist who's like, tell me about your day. And you're like, oh, you can't talk. Yeah, and you're drooling on yourself, and we've got toothpaste everywhere. I don't want to be that person. So I was like, well, I guess that only leaves one other job. So yeah, that's literally how it worked. Yeah. And then I went to New Mexico State, got my psych degree. And then from there, I was trying to figure out what exactly the options are because I feel like still it's so difficult to like figure out all the different paths between like what we do and LMFTs and like all the other options, or like even a school counselor. Um, and so I essentially chose based off of what I pictured my day to look like from the clothes I wanted to wear, which is kind of silly, but like what I envisioned, like,
Oh, that
yeah,
matters.
and
That
if it's like
matters.
scrubs, I don't think it would be me kind of a thing. Even though that sounds so nice to have a uniform again, I'm just like, oh, I crave that. Going to Catholic school for your whole life, like you're like, this is nice. I don't
Yeah.
have to think about it. I miss it a little. So yeah, I envisioned what I wanted, not only my outfit to look like, but also my like hours and time and what would that mean if I had a family. And so yeah, and there's this like instillment within me because my mom's a first grade teacher, so I want to be creative with my job. And so by the time I went to grad school and I had my internship, it was amazing because not only was it in a private practice, but then we would also volunteer within a Catholic school. So I'm like, I'm at home. I know the drill. This is awesome. And I got that little fulfillment of being a school counselor without trying to figure out IEPs. And I could just solely be there for that child for 30 minutes a week. And I was like, this is awesome. It was great. Loved it. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And then from there, just trying to figure out how do I replicate being in a private practice while being in a state where I feel like I could finally put down roots. And that's how we ended up in Austin.
that's really cool. You know, we've been so busy, I think, since like you guys came in and your group came in at AFC. So I haven't actually like gotten a lot of time to sit down with you one on one. But like as you're telling your story, I'm realizing we have a lot of common like themes. Like for example, so
Hmm.
your mom was a first grade teacher.
Yeah. Hmm.
Mine was third. So mine was like third. She was fifth for a while, but she went from like high school to, and she was like, F this, like,
Yeah. No thanks.
kids are
Hmm.
intense. I'm going to like the littles. So she went to littles. But I thought I wanted to be a teacher for a while. And then I was like, kind of thinking about what I wanted my like future to
Hmm.
look like. And I was like, do I want to be in a room with like 20 littles running around? No. Then
Mm-mm.
I was like, I'll do like one.
Yeah.
One little, like I could do that.
Hmm.
But so it's like we get to take well, there is a teaching component to therapy. Like big
True.
time.
Especially in activities as well, which I
Yeah.
absolutely love.
Yes. So it's like we really do, we are teachers. It's just teaching in a different capacity, like a different way. Um
Which is fantastic. It's one on one. I only have to be focused for an hour compared to a whole school day, which God bless teachers because I could not do that. Um, and also, I make it a point whenever I am working with a kiddo and I'm trying to, they're having a lot of difficulty at school in having those conversations with their teacher, even with their school counselor of, I want to support you, and I want to inform you of if we're working on a certain coping skill or I taught them something, this is how we can work together and reinforce it in the classroom because I want it to feel like we're all on this kid's team. And that starts with the parents and the child itself because I don't want anything to stop once they walk out those doors because if it
Right.
does, it's not real.
Right.
And that's not a good feeling.
Mm-mm. Like it takes really so much more than just our 1 hour and just us too, especially with littles. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there is like a lot of work that goes by. It's so much more than an hour. So
Mm-hmm.
much more.
That's why also I make it a point to make sure that, because I only see them for a week, and I describe it as like mom and dad are the gatekeeper for you coming to see me. So if you want my help, that's wonderful, but who else can we ask for help from? Because that's like the biggest thing is teaching anybody at any age how to ask for help. Because this feeling of being embarrassed and saying, oh, it'll just go away, like whether it's the problem or this feeling. And that's what I'm trying to instill is not only asking for help, but having people trust themselves again and say, like, okay, this is what's happening. It's real. I believe it to be true. Now I need to share this with somebody else. Because if we just sit in silence, that sounds extremely painful. And I don't want anybody to feel that way. And so we talk about like, who can you ask for help from? So that's a big deal. Side note, by the way, the teacher creativity, it you got it. Because as I've seen the wagon and the bags, you are committed. Guys, we have a lot of activities coming into a fully stocked playroom. And I was just so amazed. I was just like, she brought her own stuff. Like, I like it. We're very specific in what we want to do. I appreciate it.
Dude. No, because I was bringing in like 4 bags. Like one's my fidget bag, one's my bag of like junk, like laptop and all that. And like you just get to a point you're like, I literally can't add another bag because I don't have a third arm to carry all of this. So
You put this single work bag to shame. You're just like, okay, but like, do you have multiple with categories? I don't think so. I appreciate it.
oh my God. I had clients too, like my littles, where I had to bring it. They're like, your wagon's not here. I'm like, no, it's not. We're downsizing, kid. We're downsizing. They're like, oh, like, I'm like, man.
It cracks me up what kids notice because you're just like that was a big deal. Like I had a little one accidentally break a table, and then so not a big deal, and I put wood glue on it. But then my session after, I was just like, just so you know, don't touch that table because it's not strong enough right now. It's a little broken. And the very next session, a week later, they'll be like, how's that table doing?
Dude, they
And
have good memories. Yeah.
not only that, but I'm like so excited to tell them I got the most amazing wood glue ever. It expanded. Oh, I don't know if I was more mind blown about their question or my answer to their question of like,
Oh
so
my God.
I was waiting for somebody to ask me about the table and I feel like I delivered and it's stronger than ever. So if you want to check it out, it's in room 4. Highly recommend. Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay. So one of the questions on here is about, well, it's interesting. So the question is, did you always know that you wanted to be a therapist? And what I'm hearing is you kind of found your way to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you were in the right ballpark, and then you just kind of, I mean, like you were saying, like LMFT or LPC or social worker, or all the things that are similar and different at the same time. And then you just found your way to LPC.
Mm-hmm. Because I liked the idea, because at the time it was, oh, this is as much as education as I'll need if I ever want to open up my own private practice. And I like that. I like that the only step up from that was becoming a doctor, and that all that would allow me to do was teach. And I was like, hard pass. I'll just worry about myself and like making sure I'm doing a good job. That's all I can give right now. Um, and I liked the idea of, especially just being in mental health and really valuing how important it is, and feeling like growing up, my person that I spoke to, my confidant, was my mom, which was amazing. But like, not everybody has that. And that's the hardest thing, is trying to figure out who you can trust enough to share all the scary things with. Because one, not that not a lot of people can handle it, a lot of people don't know what to do when you're like, here's this really hard stuff. I'm going to give it to you. I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen. And they go, what? Like, I can't do
Don't know what to do. Like,
throw it back.
Don't think about it. Just don't think about it. And you're like,
I hated it. Yeah. And so that's what I wanted to have, to essentially have for other people, is somebody that can say, this is really hard. And I don't know exactly how it feels, and I never will. But what I can do is sit with you through this and sit with you through these emotions, because the hardest thing to do is to do nothing. And that's why the concept of like meditation sounds so scary to me, because it's just like you just sit there. And so what I do is I do lots of mindfulness of like, how are we feeling, like physically feeling, and then what are our thoughts doing? And so really slowing things down, so we're not numbing ourselves in a sense, because to me the scariest emotion is feeling numb, because you don't know when it's going to end, and that could be really isolating. And so I'd rather feel anything else than numb. And so yeah, that's how it worked. And also there was this weird thing, I don't know if you would call it the vault or the cone of silence, but like once I heard it, like it was done. Like, I don't know, I just like held it for people until they were ready to like pick it up again. And so that was one thing that I noticed in one of the questions was like, how does this affect my personal life? Of in college, I realized I was like, oh, I'm having one-sided relationships. Like I would ask everything so that nobody could ever know me, because if they couldn't know me, they couldn't judge me. And I wouldn't have to carry that of, oh, this person doesn't like me. And so I hit a wall of feeling like I needed to be perfect and on top of my game, and nobody could see me cry or be weak, because I felt like I built it up so high that, well, if I'm crumbling, how am I supposed to say it's going to be okay to another woman who's having a really hard time? And so I had, this is why she's still my best friend to this day, I had a total breakdown. And she's just like, this is nuts. You thinking that you're not allowed to cry. Like, what is that about? And then I was like, what is this about? As I'm like, and snot running down my face, and I couldn't breathe. And it was this whole thing. But like, that's what has kept me going for so long, is that I don't allow myself to have one-sided relationships. Because to me, if I'm counseling. And if we're counseling, I'm not your friend. And it's a totally different thing. So I really make sure that I can talk to this person about good things and bad things, and that I'm not scared to share with them what's happening. So that's the one thing that's really been helpful, and also hard, because like being healthy is exhausting. That's what nobody tells you. You're so exhausting because you're trying to be mindful and like cognizant of everything. And so like giving yourself a break every once in a while of like, I'm just going to do nothing because I can't be mindful right now. And that's okay.
yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, that's like all the questions and none of the questions. I don't know what I did.
I was so into it. I'm so glad that you said all of that. That was so poetic. Like, please,
Thanks.
Please, like, keep going there. That was amazing. and so you did really talk, you really touched on how being a therapist influences your personal life. Like, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I've come across, like, especially with like new friends or new people, but people who find out that we're therapists, especially like when you first meet them, I always get like, oh, are you like diagnosing me right now? Or are you like analyzing me? And I'm like, you're not paying me $125 an hour, so.
So no, I'm just staring at you and trying to figure out what you're saying like a normal
And now
person.
I'm wondering if I should be secretly.
That's funny.
Like, if I want to be friends with you, like, are you hiding something? But like, people really think sometimes that, like, because we're therapists, we're not human. And which in the next question on here was like being a therapist in the pandemic. We are totally human, and we're just as human, if not more. I don't know how you'd be more human than human, but like, we are human just as much as our clients. Like, just because we're therapists doesn't put us above doing the work that we talk about. And I definitely tell people that. I even tell clients that too, like, especially the clients that come in like with I've had people call me like doctor before, like, and I'm like, excuse you? Like, excuse you? Like, I'm not.
Yeah. It's funny how we could be offended by it, but in a way it's just like, no. I don't know if it's this like being so transparent and like I never want, because I understand like we in this relationship with clients, we have a certain level of influence over them. And so I never want it to feel like they don't understand exactly who I am or what my role is. And so the doctor thing freaks me out, especially when parents tell their kids like, "Oh, you're going to the doctors because they like enjoy the doctors." I'm like, that would be weird.
Like,
because like
doctor, like, I've been called an emotion doctor before, and I'm like, coach, like an emotion coach.
Yeah,
like
I've gotten called that. I was like, that's great. Yeah.
Like, because doctor implies that I'm gonna fix something, and I don't know about you, but like, I run into a lot of issues with that, especially around the littles. Like, I think because parents, and I don't have kids yet, but parents are really used to taking kiddos to the doctor. Like, go to the doctor, right, give you medicine, fix, like, go to the doctor, repeat. And so in a lot of ways, unless they've been to like, occupational therapy before, in some other role where it like builds and something takes time. But like, we can't fix, like, we can't give you something that's going to clear something up immediately, especially without having like the help of like the teacher. And like you were saying, like, we really need that wraparound support for most kids, especially the kids that we see. I mean, we usually don't see people because they're doing well. And
and especially because I was trying to explain to a child why it's important to continue on, because they felt like, well, why would I come in if the problem, which is mending a relationship with somebody in their family, that's been solved? So like, what's the point in you? And so I kind of explained to him that I pride myself in analogies, and like this one was a stretch and like borrowing. But essentially, like, we don't just take the car in when it's broken down. We need maintenance. And so what I'm doing is that even though this one problem solved, I want to make sure that we've like learned from this experience, and so we don't ever get here again. And what do we do? Because it's really hard to explain to a child that I know it doesn't seem like a big deal right now, but it's affecting everything. Especially like your self-esteem, your self-worth, how you're communicating with other people, even though you don't realize it just yet. And so really trying to make counseling feel like they're learning something in a way that's meaningful to them. Because we did a sand tray and they were like, this is awesome. Where before we were like coloring and stuff, and it got translated into like, oh, it was a boring session to the child's parent. And I'm like, yeah, but we're doing stuff. I'm not just like staring at him and he's staring at me and we're just like, well, the weather, right? Like it's not that painful. And so that's why, especially with kiddos, I get not a little spazzy, but like everything's heightened. And so if I'm excited, I'm gonna like show you it. Or if I'm like, so how did you show your anger? Are you punching walls? Like what are you doing? Are you like stomping things and throwing things off the shelves? And they go, no. I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. Because they're trying to figure out what's normal because nobody, they'll let you know when you're doing something bad, but it's rare that they'll say like, oh, I really appreciated that when they're doing something good. And so it was just kind of funny. And then to re-explain it all to parents, it's just like, so this is what happened. Your kid had a great time.
Yeah.
And also, I'm sorry in a way you weren't there to see it, but the only way they were able to fully express what was happening was with a person that they felt like wasn't going to get them in trouble in a way. And that's the hardest thing too, is I want to be that safe person. But also if mom and dad need to know something, we're telling them together because they're on our team and we don't keep secrets from teammates, right? And so just the little things.
Tell me more about like what types of clients you like to work with. Like I know we kind of touched on it with like the areas of expertise. So I guess go ahead and tell us more about that, but maybe like an extra layer or two behind that. So yeah, just start anywhere with that.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about kids, but I also see adults and I love seeing adults because I'm like, I get to sit in a chair as opposed to like on the floor and I'm
Or
playing. When you get to sit in a chair and you're like, let's have a conversation. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, no, this is a delight. Whatever you're going to tell me, I'm so excited to be sitting upright. So it's funny because in grad school, we were assigned, like all the new interns were essentially assigned anger management. And I was just like, ooh, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. Why would I be equipped to handle this? And lo and behold, it's my favorite thing. Growing up in an Italian household, I feel like the second language was yelling because either somebody's not listening, you're not like showing respect. There's a lot of like rules around communication essentially. And so when I talk about things of like, sometimes it's hard to imagine like how can a person get to this point of like seeing red and saying all the wrong things. And I'm like, yeah, I've had to actively make a choice not to do that because I've seen that as an example. But I also know I don't want to become that because I know what it feels like to have that done to you and it's not fun. And so from that, you start figuring out of like, okay, so if I have a choice in how I'm communicating, I also have a choice in like how I set up the game in a sense, because if you take away my ability to yell, okay, that's fine. But then if you take my ability to walk away, we don't like that. And I'm like, ugh, what do you want me to do? I can't yell. I can't walk away. I'm feeling trapped and I'm just going to crumble. Like, I don't know what to do. And so that's my favorite thing is with anger management is we're going to talk about all the warning signs. So what you do before you hit red and before that switch gets flipped, because once you hit that, you're sure as hell not listening and you can't say anything that's going to be like eloquent and lovely. And so that's something I have to remind everybody essentially that walks through the door of the reason why it feels like I'm saying the right thing is not only have I been trained to listen and pick out and make it the perfect reflection, but also time is standing still in this room. And so we can like look at a scene and pick it apart what went well, what can we like improve upon, and take it from there. Where in real life, it's on full speed, and it's not easy to be like, okay, I feel, and like make an I statement and be kind and cool and collective when you go, I'm pissed. I can't believe that just happened. And you're just like, are you kidding me? And so it's not perfect. None of this is perfect. And it's just trying to figure out how to roll with it. And that's my favorite thing is when I give clients the coping skills to like, okay, what do I do before I hit red? How do I know when I'm about to hit it? What do I do afterwards and like in between so I don't feel like I'm gonna hit red as fast? Because that's not a good feeling when you're constantly irritable and on edge. So I love me some angry people because I
Dude,
relate.
I love how you explained all that. Like, I kind of, sorry, I like stopped your flow, but I was really,
No.
that was so inspirational. Like, I got to share that with you. That was really, you must have been a poet in a past life or something, because you are like some kind of poetic speaker or something, because you're very eloquent with, like, you have a way with words. But I got like super burned in grad school, and Janet actually just joined on here, and in Janet's live I was telling her about like a high conflict couple that I got. It was like my first like client ever. It was like high conflict, like anger management, like to like
Help.
from 0 to 10 they were at 20 type of thing. And I
Yeah.
was like, I'm never doing this again. And so you said that in such a way where I'm like, you know, maybe I should give that another shot. So anyway, stopping you to like say like, you gave me something to think about. So
No, well, it's funny that you say it like that because in real life it depends upon the situation. And so you know how in Sarah's Lunch and Learn we talked about like conflict styles?
huh.
And so I was like, I know what I'm gonna be. I'm gonna be an owl, and so I'm trying to compromise with like everybody, or at least I'll be a fox, right? Like I understand that we'll have to make sacrifices, each of us, that we're trying to figure it out together. I'm a turtle. And I was just like, this can't be it. I'm so embarrassed. Like, I should at least be a shark. But then my second one was a shark. So I'm like this little angry turtle that gets backed into a corner. And then I'm like, screw it. And then I just like freak out. So yeah, that's how that works. But the nice thing that she reminded us with conflict styles is it depends
Yes.
in
Yes.
like everything. Because if I was like an angry shark at work, obviously no one would want to talk to me, and that's my job. And so it was just really funny in terms of, oh, that makes sense. Because essentially what I'm doing is I'm going from it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's not fine, and like hitting my red, and I have no yellow. And so it's just a good reminder of, oh, it's okay if it's not fine. But also, it's okay if I really don't feel like talking about my feelings because I can't do it right now because it's too much. And so yeah, it says something when you're like, I don't want to share and I'm a counselor and like I can't do it right now. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
You know, I've had a lot of clients, like the few adults that I actually work with who are over 17. um I've done a lot of work with them around, like, you know, a lot of emotions get labeled as bad or good, and anger is
Mm-hmm.
certainly one that has been labeled as a bad emotion. And I think that's come, you know, from like a controlling perspective, because like anger gets like out of control, you know, and so it gets this like reputation for being as such, like anger gets out of control, so therefore it's bad. And I've done a lot of like work with them around like an emotion itself is not bad. We
Right.
can make good and bad choices based off
Mm-hmm.
those emotions. So it's really it's about choices, not necessarily the emotions. And
Right.
that has really given people a different perspective. Like, people have been like, what? Like, what do you mean?
Mm-hmm. That's my favorite is the one, I've never thought about it like that. Ooh, I love that phrase. Or like the two of, oh, oh my God, that's the best. thing you can tell me, like, is just like, oh, I've never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that's see a lot of hand motions come out too in sessions, especially because I'm wearing a mask all the time. So I'm just like, let me show you what's going on underneath this. No, I really liked this idea of we can make bad choices, but that emotion isn't bad. And then also leading into sometimes we make bad choices, but that doesn't make us a bad person.
Right.
Because that's really hard too when it comes to kids in this black and white thinking of everything is like the opposite. There's a right and a wrong. And so then I have them essentially go down the list of like, well, what's an easy choice that's like black and white, concrete, you know what path to take? What's a gray choice? What's harder? Because that's also another thing is between figuring out how do we make the right decision for us, and then also figuring out that we're going to make mistakes and that's okay. Because for the longest time, it feels like there's this feeling of being petrified of if I make the wrong choice, everything's going to crumble. And to me, that's essentially what anxiety is constantly this negative loop of if you do one thing wrong, your whole life is not going to be where it's at. And that's what I would do, like growing up before I went to counseling myself in college of I would rewind the whole day, figure out what I could do better, what I did well, which of course was few and far between because all we were focusing on was being critical. And I couldn't fall asleep. And it was constant. And so going into counseling, talking about what's happening and talking about what anxiety is and what that means. And then you figure out like, oh, so that's why I do that weird thing. Because a lot of, as you know, like anxiety can physically manifest itself in sensations. And so like, oh yeah, in the fifth grade, I had stomach aches all the time and I didn't want to go to school because I thought the teacher personally hated me. She didn't. She could care less, but in my mind, she hated me. Or like one anxiety thing that I get is I get super nervous. My legs will feel like ants are crawling on them, and I get so itchy. And so it's kind of funny because even though it's frustrating at times, I know how to cope with it. Dry brush is the most beautiful thing ever because you get the sensation of itching without actually hurting yourself. So fun fact right there. But then also I know how to like point it out in other people of like if we're picking at our skin, is it really something that's going on with us mentally? And figuring out of, oh, we're just trying to do things to cope and get on with the day. But some things aren't as great as others. And so how do we swap out certain maladaptive behavior so that it can be sustainable and feel good and not feel like you're beating yourself up at the end of the day?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, when you're talking about swapping out too, I have a lot of parents that come in and, you know, they can identify a negative behavior and they're ready to like take that away. And, you know,
Yeah.
that will be part of the goal. Like, yeah, we don't want to have that long term. And it's also not helpful if you were to just take that away without like putting something else there that is just as effective for them. Because it's like if you take out a leg from a table, table's gonna fall down. Like it's not gonna stand up on three legs. And coping skills are like that too. I mean, like, or you're just gonna, you know, it's gonna crumble. It's not gonna work.
Mm-hmm. Or we're going to find something that is even worse somehow, which is
yes.
terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Like we go from bad to worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So, what are some of the common stigmas or misconceptions about therapy that you encounter as a therapist? I think you actually came up with that question.
Oh, did I? For previous people? I don't have an answer. No, I'm just kidding.
I came up with the base question and then, but I didn't like how I worded it. And I was like, I'm not putting that out on the internet. I don't like how I said that. And then you said it like so eloquently. And I was like, okay, I like that. And I like put it on here. So anyway,
It definitely depends on the day. Mm-hmm.
What are some common stigmas or misconceptions about therapy that you have encountered as a therapist?
You definitely touched on it earlier, this idea of we're analyzing people, or like we're reading their minds. And so I remind that to everybody, especially kids, of parents and adults aren't mind readers. So we have to tell them what's going on. Because I feel like growing up, there was always a sense of like, my mom is telepathic and she'll just know if I chirp or whatever, however it works, she'll know. And then I got burned one day because I was like, if I just focus hard enough, she'll bring back my library book and I won't have to pull a card. Lo and behold, had to pull a card that day, first card in my entire life, devastated. So that's how I figured out parents weren't mind readers. It was fine. I just cried myself at my desk. Everything was fine. I had a stern talk with her of like, so I realized you didn't bring me my library book, and this is what happened. This is fine. It was a learning lesson. Those cards are the bane of my existence, and so not a fan. But anyway, so hate them. Because it's also like the walk of shame of like, I feel like, oh, are you a Game of Thrones fan?
Not really. I've seen a few, but
Did you ever see the shame one when they're like ringing a bell and like shaming her essentially as she's like walking through the town streets? Okay, this is the heightened version of that. I am what am I, 8? And I'm just walking to the little board in the back and having to pull it. But in my mind, it was that. It was somebody ringing a bell and screaming shame and people throwing trash on me. But of course, that's not what was happening. It's just how I was feeling. I should have been in theater. But now, like dramatic, these scenes are in my head. But yeah, so this concept of we're not mind readers, but then also, oh, another thing of I have the perfect answer and I know exactly what to say, and yet I don't. And the only reason why I know what to say in this moment is, first of all, it's paused. Second of all, I've had the education to figure out how to string a beautiful sentence together. Third of all, as soon as I hit that door frame, I'm going to lose all my communication skills because that's what happens. You go from so focused as like, okay, this is what they said. Okay, I wonder if it's this emotion, and just offering feedback. And I was explaining to Danielle, our intake coordinator, of like, oh my goodness, can you tell me what I'm trying to ask you right now? Because I don't know what happened. And like, as soon as I walked out the door, I can't say anything. Can you fix it, please? And she's just like, yeah, it's okay. Like, thank you. Loses all of it. Oh, and another thing is, I don't know, I think it's more for myself of this concept that I have to make sure that my life, I never want to feel like hypocritical. And so I'm constantly afraid, especially in the future when I have kids, of, well, what am I going to do when my kid's over there throwing a tantrum and I'm dying and I'm losing everything that I have taught other parents, and I'm feeling so embarrassed at this moment because I don't know what to do when I'm freezing up. And so I'm extremely mindful of how I'm presented outside of counseling. And so that's also scary too, where you go like, oh, I'm building all this stuff up in my head and I'm just a human being. And so reminding them of, we are all human beings trying to figure this out. But I think another stigma too is when you first get assigned a client and you're hearing the areas of concern and if they have a previous diagnosis, And especially during internship, I've got like a huge tall order for this one client. And I was just thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm not equipped. I've never dealt with this diagnosis before. I'm going to let this person down. I'm so scared. Should I just turn them away? Turned out that they were my favorite client because they tried. And it didn't matter that I wasn't in the same profession that they were. It didn't matter that I wasn't the same race that they were. It didn't matter that I didn't have that exact same background that they did. I listened. I heard what they were asking for, and I was able to provide a little bit of relief. And that's all they wanted, was to be heard, be seen, and feel a little bit better. And I was like, I did it. And then afterwards you go, holy shit, I did it. Like, this is amazing. And then the next day you walk into the room and the client's like, that's not how I feel. No. And you're just like, ugh, I had it for 30 seconds and I lost it. So that's always a nice thing too, is you could say something mind-blowing 1 minute and then just something that's like, no, that's not it. And so in those moments, I'm like, okay, if that's not it, like, put your spin on it. Tell me what I got wrong. In the sense of like, okay, that's fine if it's not it, but like, I need your feedback so we can get to that it part and really capture what's going on. Yeah.
I don't know how to follow that up.
No!
To be like so honest with you, like, I don't know what to say.
I'm breaking you. Oh no, Taylor.
Janet even said in the comments, she goes, she loves the summary that you just said. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of that. I mean, you're so right. You know, I think there's, you know, in grad school, they'll tell us, you know, it's interesting. In grad school, they'll tell us, you know, take on new clients and, you know, kind of stretch yourself for learning purposes. And then it's like you go into the next class and then the next professor is like, well, if you're not specialized in this 5 times over, then you need to refer them out to someone who is specialized 10 times over. And so, and you go to the next class and they say something else. And so you're like, like,
what do I do?
And then I think you said that so beautifully of like, you don't have to have all these, like, specialties are wonderful and knowledge is power, and yes to all of that. And the core of what we do is listening and showing up for people, because even like people can get lost in the specialties sometimes. Like, knowledge is power, and that can cloud some people sometimes. Like, they can get lost on that trail of being so like in like tunnel vision through that specialty, where, if that makes sense. In my head, it's like, you do have to be balanced. Like, I was talking to Sarah, this was months ago, and she was mentioning like she had actually just got a new client at the time, and I think this ended up being like one of her favorite clients. So very similar to you. Claire's here. Hi, Claire. And so Sarah was saying, you know, and then I guess one of her therapy friends was like doing this training and was like spending her weekend doing this training. And Sarah, you know, said, well, like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's just not what I'm doing right now. I'm not, like, I wish I had the time and energy to like go to all these trainings and all of that. And I don't know where this came from, but I just told her, like, look, trainings are important and there's a place in that for us. Like, we do need to be educated, and like, especially for like teens, we it's important to have the education and have the workshops, and it's just as important to be like watching the latest thing on Netflix, because that's to help you connect with them in ways that workshop will not. Like, what teen is going to want to be like, I would love to listen. I would love to talk to you about that freaking workshop that you went to about whatever you went to. They're going to be like, so we're watching the same show on Netflix, and I would love to talk to you about that. Yeah. Because I relate to such and such character. That's what they want to talk about.
That happens to me every time when I like plan this like great activity of this is what we're going to do. And I'm excited because obviously like I've done this, like we've got this. And they're just like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to play Candyland. And then I'm just like, cool, let's play some Candyland. And I'm like, okay, what are we learning from this? Yeah, like it's fine. My bag that weighs a ton, it's fine. Totally fine. I'm just rejected. But then I'm just like, oh no, I'm supposed to be modeling that like nothing you can do is gonna disappoint me. Right, okay. I'll just put my crayons away. It's fine. Thanks. But it's everything. And then I'll have another team. Everybody's obsessed with what is his name? Timothy Chalamet Charcuterie. He's in Dune. He's got blue eyes. He was in Oh, Beautiful Boy, which was devastating. I will show him.
Dune, but
oh, he's like the main person in Dune.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I saw the movie, but I don't know like characters or anything.
Totally fine. All she wants to talk about is Timothy. And I'm just like, oh. And she's showing me a video and it's just like, this is my like spirit guide, like person I adore. He captures everything, the essence of me. I'm just like, and in my mind, I'm just like, oh my God, like I can't do this. And then I'm just like, interesting. But Timothy's expressing how he feels. I don't really see you doing that right now. And so I'm like, how can I challenge this person? If nothing else, of like, this is what we're presenting of like, look how cool he is. I'm like, we can get there on the coolness scale, but like, give it some time, man. But that's my favorite thing is it's the preteens. I see preteens and they'll like challenge me of like, do you know this? And I'm like, nope. And then I'm instantly 95. I'm like, I don't get it.
That's a good way to put that. Yeah. Preteens are really challenging.
Yeah, it's like, you're cool, you're cool. Yeah, and then they'll be like, no, you're old. And I'm like, come on, man. I just said something cool earlier. God. Out of there. So then I just hang out with my 6-year-olds. I'm like, want to play Candyland? And they're like, yeah, let's do this. And they're into it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm looking at the rest of the questions and we got to most of them. The last two, so there's two more that I would love to cover with you. Second to last one is, how do you know if a therapist is a good fit for you? And so like, how would you define the right fit if someone were to ask you what that felt like?
I feel like in grad school, I don't know if everybody uses this analogy, but they liken it to like dating. Like it's about personality and it's supposed to click. I feel like a client knows being a client at one point. I knew my therapist was the right one when I wasn't afraid of what their reaction was going to be, of just like sharing it. And also, I never felt like I had to like edit what I was saying because I didn't want to hurt them. Because I had the experience when like I almost had a therapist like start crying in my session, and I was just like, oh my God, I just broke her. Like this isn't supposed to happen. And I was like, this is weird. And I was so thankful she didn't, because then my role would have switched and I would have been taking care of her. I'm like, that's not what this is supposed to be. This feels weird. And so it's definitely a feeling of, I could talk to this person all day. Of like, I just feel like they get it and they're listening and they kind of prove that they're listening by like offering a great reflection or challenging them in some way. And that's also my favorite part of, you know, that this is more than just a more than you can get from just any friendship, because they are challenging you and they're having you solve problems on your own, and they're not just saying, do this, everything will be good, because that's not how this works. And so when I hear from clients of, oh, I want to change up my therapist because they offered me a piece of really bad advice, and I'm like, why are they offering you advice in the first place? That's not what we do at all. Because I can never tell you what to do, because there's so many outside factors of what's playing into a single decision. And to me, that's way too much responsibility for me to make every choice. Very overwhelming. But then in a sense of wanting to feel heard is enough. And also from a clinician side of, when you go back to the basics, as you were talking about earlier, if we get so caught up in like, what are we specializing in? What's our population? What, and why, and all these things. It's, what did I learn? How do I do this? Because one thing I love about our job is that every single day is different and you can never predict it. And so in order to combat that, what I can do so I don't feel out of control of my own anxiety is I can remain stable in, okay, if something happens, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to react. And number two is I have time. And I think that's a good note for both parties, especially with clients, is having a clinician that slows time down and feeling like, I need to solve this problem right now or else something really bad is going to happen, which is a valid feeling. But is this anxiety talking, or like, is this real life, something devastating is going to happen? And so really viewing over perceived versus real threats and how we navigate through that, and feeling like also being honest in the sense of, you know what, you told me to practice this coping skill and I didn't do it, but I thought about doing it. That's fine. I'd rather you tell me the truth than say, oh yeah, I did it, just to make me feel better. Because it doesn't. Playing me up and saying, you're amazing, and all that, it doesn't make me feel better. What does make me feel good is when you feel good. And when you feel like something is finally helping and you can take a deep breath. Because if you don't feel that way, one of two things are going to have to happen. Either I need to change things up and work things out, or we need to have a really honest conversation of, it feels like you're not making progress right now. What can we do to remedy that? Does that mean we're doing something different on my end, or does that mean I need to refer you out? And being really open. Because if you can't be honest with your therapist, how in the hell are you supposed to be honest with anybody else? That sounds not only terrifying, but devastating in a way too. Yeah. And my favorite thing, and when I tell people, because it's really hard when somebody's like, hey, what are you interested in? And you go, I don't know. Like, there's so many choices. I don't know. So my favorite thing is to say, what do you hate? I'm like, easy. Hugs. When I'm too hot, like, I know all of those answers. And so it's really easy for other people to say, I don't know what I like, but I know what I don't like. And start from there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to ask me? What do you feel like I need to address? Or you're just curious. You're allowed to ask me a curiosity question.
It's about kids. I know I'm actually
Okay.
thinking of something that we had in the Google chat at AFC. It was about like I think, do you prefer a more like directive approach with kiddos?
I do. Hmm.
You do?
And
Okay.
that's not really common. Hmm.
I would love to hear more about that. I guess because it's not as common, I think I see more non-directive. But I guess yeah, like tell me more about how directive is. You didn't get to meet Monica, did you?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, Monica. I think Monica was kind of like a mix. She did a little bit of both, but she was pretty directive. I'm pretty sure.
So how it works, and sometimes I get rejected, is when I plan an activity. And so if we're focusing on, say a child comes in and they're having anxiety, for instance, and they aren't sharing any emotions with anybody, they're bottling everything up. And so I'll talk about emotions and tell them the story of the being a can of soda versus being a bottle of soda. And so what we'll do is I'll have them draw a bottle of soda. And in there, I'll have them write in all these different emotions of what they keep in. And then I'll explain that when we're a can of soda, everything irritates us. And when it irritates us, that can of soda gets shaken up really, really hard, right? And by the time we've reached our absolute limit, we crack it open and it explodes and it goes everywhere. And we say, we hate emotions. I hate my family. I hate everything. Everything sucks. And it's so painful. Or for a soda bottle, what happens if that bottle gets shaken up a little bit is we slowly crack it open and we close it really fast. And we slowly crack it open and we close it really fast. And what we're doing is we're explaining little by little what's happening, not only to other people, but to ourselves of, okay, I have racing thoughts right now. What does that mean? Okay, what are the thoughts actually telling me? Okay, is this a real thought or is this anxiety right now? Okay, if it's anxiety, how do I prove it wrong? And so not only am I pairing them with a story, I'm also demonstrating what emotions we're keeping in. Because typically, we don't keep in any of the good emotions that are considered of happy, excited, all those wonderful qualities. And so we're just building in frustration and irritability. And then I'm having them break down, okay, I trust myself and I know I can do this right now. And then what do I do now? And so then we make a game plan of, okay, so the next time you feel like you're building up emotions, how do we get to the point where it doesn't feel like you're about to explode and it feels like we can regulate our emotions and de-escalate and go from there? So that'll take about 30 minutes. And then they're like, okay, now I want to just do my own thing. I'm like, okay, now let's do it. So that's how that works. So I'll do like one for me, one for you kind of a thing of
Yeah.
I can, because then it's a really easy thing to explain to parents of, okay, so this is silly, but even in like some of the exercises I do, it's a lot of like breath work and mindfulness because when we can't control anything, we can control our breathing. And so, or we can control muscle tension and letting it go. So we're pairing a physical sense of relief with a mental sense of relief. And so then I'll teach little ones these tricks and then I'll explain it to parents of like, this is what they're going to be working on. And so if you want to use this word of, this is silly, but with the muscle tension release technique, somehow the child likened it to being a Yeti because he likes to growl. And so I was like, okay, so instead of Yeti growls, I want you to do Yeti muscles. And so he like flexes all his muscles and he makes all these like big stances. And I was like, okay, that's great. But I also need you to do it and pretend you're at school. So I want you to do invisible Yeti muscles. And then he goes, I'm like, are you doing it? He's like, I'm doing it. So I was like, cool. So then we practice invisible Yeti muscles. So how that works is you go toes to tummy and nobody can see you like flexing. And it's just perfect so that he can focus on that, feel calm and feel like, okay, I'm not so tense and so frustrated from what just happened 2 seconds ago. and I can hear what my mom is saying, or I can actually play whatever game I want to play, and I'll be so focused on, man, that little one just made me so mad, and now I'm a Yeti and I'm growling. We can just enjoy our time again. Yeah, that's how we do it.
That's so cool. I
Thanks.
have not like I love trying to incorporate activities with certain kids. You know, like you have
Yeah.
some kids that are like, no, no, I don't want to do that. But like sometimes they enjoy
Mm-hmm.
rejecting you. Like they want you. Like I had a kiddo the other day. She realized that there were books in the office, and she was like, "Can you like read me a book while I draw?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so
That's
like I
awesome.
was like, "Okay, I'm gonna read them off, and you just tell me which one you want." Okay. And we literally went through probably 10 books.
Wow.
No, no, no. She wasn't even like looking at them. She just no, no, no. And
Mm-hmm.
the ones that we got to, she would like turn. Okay. And then so,
Oh.
but she like, I had a couple of kids this last week. They almost like enjoyed rejecting me,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
like noticed it. I noticed it. I was like, okay,
So I'm
okay, there's something
curious.
like that.
Yeah, the next time you get all the no's is saying, I know we're taught not to do yes or no questions, but if a kid likes saying no, I want to say phrases that I know they'll say no to. So it's just like, so what should we do when we're really, I don't want to say punching holes in walls because that was already one thing. Like, what should we do if our brother hits us? Should we hit him back? Now. Should we scream at him? Now. Should we stomp our feet really hard? Now. So we go on a no spree. And then I try to figure out, okay, how do I get this kid to say yes? I was like, do you think we could talk to mom and dad? Yes. Do we think that we have to, I don't know, because the next phrase I wanted to say was another no. I was like, do we think we have to solve all the problems? No. So that's something too. But if a kid stumbles up and says yes, and then you go, oh, they think they have to solve all the problems, and like they're answering genuinely, then you get more insight too in a way of them liking to go on the spree while also seeing if their views are actually in sync with kind of where they're supposed to be in terms of progress. And if they're not, that's okay. But it's a great point of like, oh, we need to circle back because he thinks he's all alone when he has to make these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 6. So what do we
Yeah,
do now?
yeah.
Huh.
Wow. Well, in the future, I'll probably like email you and slide in your inbox and be like, can I just like borrow your brain for like this kid client that I have? Because it
Yeah.
was so good. You given me just without like just talking, just the way that you are. I've learned like a lot of things from you.
Thank
Just really
you.
appreciate. Um, and I know we've gone a little bit over time today, but and so with that in mind, I want to ask you the last question that I ask everybody on these lives. If
Yeah.
someone presently or in the future watching this video is on the fence about starting therapy, what would you say to them?
I would say that it makes sense that starting therapy is scary, but to me, not starting is even scarier. And so also thinking to yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen? And trying to figure out if that actually can happen and challenging yourself. And the best thing about therapy is if you hate it, you don't have to do it. You don't have to come back. You don't have to talk to that therapist. You don't have to do any of that. But I think if you're really, truly thinking about it, I think that says something. And that feeling alone or whatever feeling you're having, a therapist is a great person to talk to and remind you that those painful feelings are temporary and remind you of what your strengths are, and those are permanent and long lasting. And so, how do we just capitalize on making you see in a different light? Because that's all it is we're just shifting perspectives. And that's funny because I was at Office Max laminating stuff, and this woman was just like, oh, I love this, because I think there was like birthday breaths, like teaching a child how to breathe while focusing on a birthday cake. And I was like, oh, did you read my riddle? She goes, no, I didn't see it. I'm like, try to figure out my riddle. It's the one that I think Catherine posted, the sign with the parking spots. It was like, what number parking spot is this car covering? Have you ever seen that?
Is this on the Google?
Yeah, I think it might be. And it's like a sign. Okay. So in session, so if you ever have me, this is the answer. I ask them what it is, and then they can't figure it out. And then I like flip the card around, and I'm like, this is the answer. I'm like, that's what counseling is. It's shifting your perspective. That's it. That's all it is. I'm not magic. I'm not a mind reader, but I care. And that's another thing, is that when it feels like nobody cares, somebody does. And you just have to find the right person and keep asking people to care or to listen until somebody finally does. Because just because you haven't found the right person yet doesn't mean they don't exist. We just haven't met them. And that's okay.
And to keep trying,
yeah.
And don't stop after the first one.
Because if I've had 2 wonderful counselors in my life. If I would have stopped after one of them, I would have been like, oh gosh, probably wouldn't have a career like this. And also that a lot of this is based on personality, and you just want to find somebody that clicks. And it's okay if it's not the first person, it's figuring out somebody that you can just talk to. That's all this is just talking. So why not make it enjoyable? That's it.
Yeah. Super well said. I cannot follow that up. I probably start going before you when I answer my own questions first, ask you, and then me answer first, and then let you go from. Mental note. I'm making a mental note. In all future meetings, I have to beat you to the punch now. Like, let me go before Maria. Let me go before Maria. Please. Like, I'll cut you in line.
No, you offer wonderful feedback. No, you are very eloquent. I don't know what it is. And if it makes you feel better, if when I listen back to this, I'm going to be like, oh, I sound so annoying because I don't hear what you hear. But also, I think it's a compliment. I'm like, okay, cool. Because my fear is like, oh, if they find me so annoying, no one's going to want to be a client. But thankfully, some people do. And they want to be a client or they just want to talk to me. And so thank you for letting me talk to you. That's it.
I thoroughly enjoyed this meeting. Thank you so much for your time on this Friday evening. And let me go ahead and wrap up the show. So thank you guys for attending this Instagram Live, and you can catch us on every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. The lovely Maria can be found on Instagram. What is your Instagram handle? MV Counseling?
Yeah, MV.counseling. It's my initials.
And I will put that in the description box under this video along with the timestamps and all that. So people can find you in the present and in the future. So yeah, thank you, lady, so much.
Thank you. And my teenager is, well, not teenager, preteens, probably not even going to be impressed that I know how to work this, that probably embarrassed of like, oh, you just figured it out. Oh, cool. And There's so much. I'm like, am I going to screw this whole thing up? Because technology is just like painful. So I'm glad I didn't mess it up and we
You,
survived until the end.
we didn't have to like try 3 times. We just
Mm-mm.
on the first try.
It's my favorite.
Okay, well, thank you all, and we'll catch you next Friday night. Bye.
Bye, Taylor.